later, another chapbook, Compressions, published by Peter Howard. And now Truth Be Told, which contains the first two books as well as an introduction and a new third section, which is called Tongue-Tied. Each section has both epigrams and a companion essay in which I try to discuss or defend what I think I'm up to in this often strange form. The companion essays also function for me as a counterpoint to make vivid for the reader what's gained and what's lost in the effort at compression. Further, the essays are part of my long meditation on the qualities of the writer's vocation and life, on obsession those of you who know my novel, The Beholder, or books like Compared to What will recall. Let's start with a few epigrams from 10 years ago. Let me offer a caution about this. In the book, as you'll see, the epigrams are typeset 1 or 2 to the page. This gives them not only an additional self-importance, it really argues that they deserve the white space, and it invites the reader to weigh them in this regard. As for hearing the epigrams read aloud as opposed to reading them and perhaps mulling them, well, this is a literary form, and it may be hard to catch some of the nuances of what I'm after, but here we are. Laura read you the one that, for me, started the entire game. And it goes like this. A man in middle age sitting in an outdoor cafe, 2 young women passing his table, walking faster than he thinks he'd be able to run after them. Here's another one. His problem is that his soul looks like his body. His problem is that his soul looks like his body. The vanity of self-loathing. He could be deemed a monster, but only by himself. Sex. What puts you in contact with people you might otherwise never know. You know, the other day I was on Denny Smithson's book show on KPFA, and just entering the building I realized that a lot of people in the audience of KPFA might not like some of this. I really like Denny. The complex and surprising lives of others. Envy as failure of the imagination. The complex, surprising lives of others. Envy as failure of the imagination. This one I need to explain, the one I'm about to do. The gift of tongues is what certain fundamentalists call the way they talk to God, in what to us might sound like nonsense syllables. The gift of tongues. As you might know, a glossary is a list of terms, the Greek root being gloss, tongue. Glossolalia is talking in tongues. As for cunnilingus, the root there is Latin for tongue. If you don't know what the word itself means, please leave the room. The gift of tongues. A soul en route to glossolalia, but lingering at cunnilingus. The gift of tongues. A soul en route to glossolalia, but lingering at cunnilingus.
Where'd you get that one?
Geez, you know, I read about this shit. Now, sometimes I just take a fragment and let it reverberate. And you can, when you work on this small a canvas, you can lead yourself astray. Maybe there's no reverb for the reader, but that's kind of part of the fun of the form. So here's one. It takes up a whole page. He'd grown afraid of winter. Apropos of Freud's thesis that a couple always has in the marital bed each mate's parents. Through the waning years of his marriage, he often felt the presence of his wife's next husband. Apropos of Freud's thesis that a couple always has in the marital bed each mate's parents, Through the waning years of his marriage, he often felt the presence of his wife's next husband. In the introduction to this book, I try to locate where the epigrammatic fits into the rest of my writer's life, and I'm going to read just a little bit from the introduction. Over the last 10 years, among other projects, I wrote a second book of nonfiction about warm ocean and the Pacific, collaborated twice with marine photographer Wayne Levin, dreamed and completed a novel, launched myself into a book on salsa. If the epigrammatic was never all I was up to with language, neither was it far from my mind. I'd read aphorists, suddenly hear an idiom, as if for the first time, tease out the component energies of vices and virtues, precise the genesis of this gag reflex or that, would once more go to my late mother's dictionary to ascertain root, vector. I treasured revelations provoked by unexpected similarities, by rejuvenating word inversions, capricious juxtapositions, willfully mixed metaphors. Here, as often as not, to connect the dots, to unpack meaning, the reader would have to be alert, rethink or reread a line that had initially required only an instant. Further, both form and content were frequently polemical, from the Greek polemos, war. Disputatious, controverting, contentious, not just in response to human foible or fate, but because in this medium with pretensions to the magisterially impersonal and universal, the genially or implacably authoritative, the writer was willy-nilly exposing himself. I saw The Price of the Ride published in 1996. And it was amazing, really. You could hardly say the nation was crying out for the epigrammatic. As a writer, I've sometimes felt like a trapeze artist, or that with a new book out, I dodged yet another bullet by following a mania. But with The Price of the Ride, I actually felt like the woman in the carnival act. She's strapped to the spinning wheel. The image that came to me is that the knife thrower is finally finished. I'm still strapped to the wheel. I'm not hurt, but the wheel has stopped and I'm upside down. So much for a life in art. You also get a small sense of one's capacity for self-pity. Well, with that first book of the epigrammatic published, I should have stopped, but it turns out I wasn't done. Part of writing is repetition, compulsion. On I went to what became the book Compressions. And the quote that opened that chapbook is from Euripides' Bacchae. You'll recall that the god Dionysius, in the guise of one of his own followers, is speaking to the law and order king Pentheus, who disrespects him. And Dionysius says, "You do not know what life you live, or what you do, or who you are." Sometimes the writer kind of wants to play God, and there's an aspect of divine arrogance in some forms of art. As for the second quote that opened this chapbook Compressions, the bells of hell go ting-a-ling-a-ling, for you, but not for me. You can see I was on a trip. Here are some of the epigrams from the middle section of this book, which is called Compressions. A woman is talking. "He deserved to die," she said. "He got off light." "He deserved to die," she said. "He got off light." "A Jew who veers Republican may need to have his foreskin examined." That's kind of an in-joke. You know, part of the epigrammatic is, you see stuff that upsets you, and you almost wonder, like, how could it be? But there it is. It's part of life. It's part of the world. Jews as conservatives. "A Jew who veers Republican may need to have his foreskin examined." Said the adulteress to her lover, "You're more interested in my marriage than I am." "You wasted your life," she says, flattering both herself and him. "You wasted your life," she says, flattering both herself and him.